Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm joined now by Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, Seb. Seb and I are going to talk today about All or Nothing, Tottenham Hotspur, the famous Amazon docu-series with a team of people that followed Tottenham throughout last season. Starring Jose Mourinho, Danny Rose, Eric Dyer, and other names that you probably recognise from already being a football fan. We don't know what we're going to talk about because we haven't done it yet, so there's no trail for this. Just turn off now if you're not interested, or stay if you think you might be and turn off halfway through when you realise that you're not. But hey, something that you won't turn off halfway through or at the beginning, do you know what that is, Seb?
Is it The Athletic?
It is, and one of the reasons for that is because you can't actually turn it off, because I don't know if that's really terminology that you use with an app or with a website, but, theoretically, meaningfully, you wouldn't want to, even if there was an off button, just because of the very, very high quality of the writing on The Athletic. It's a fantastic place to be, particularly if you're a Spurs fan, because Spurs have two writers, one of whom I watched episode 9 of All or Nothing last night. I haven't got to the end yet. I don't know, whatever, the penultimate one. So I hope there's not some big twist at the end of the season. But I saw Charlie share his little face pop up in a Zoom call, which made me all warm and fuzzy inside, because Charlie's a wonderful, wonderful chap. Also, we have Jack Pickbrook, who I don't think I've seen in the series anywhere, but it's a two-man team covering Spurs. I mean, you'll tell me, Seb, you're a Spurs fan. That's a good thing, right?
Hey, they do a great job. And also, that's been shown this week because obviously, like every other Spurs fan, I've been excitingly following. Excitingly following? Does that work?
Excitedly.
It's been a really long week for reasons that will become clear to the Tifo audience next week. We've had quite a draining couple of days, but Charlie and Jack have done a super job with David Ornstein, of course, on the Gareth Bale saga, and that's been very exciting to watch. And their coverage has really genuinely been superb, which is and they've provided excellent analysis for what's obviously been a very quickly evolving story. Which by the time this comes out should have culminated in Gareth Bale returning.
Let's wind Gareth Bale into the conversation a bit later on when we talk about Daniel Levy, because I think it's a very interesting side of things. But anyway, if you like the sound of that, you can currently get The Athletic for £1 a month as part of an introductory offer, which does end soon, I believe. So if you're interested in doing that, please go ahead. It's totally worth it. And you can do that by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo. Yeah, that's the one. theathletic.com/TIFO. Anyway, for now, I will leave you in the warm embrace and the cool hands of myself. Let's begin, Seb, by talking just generally about the idea of a documentary following a team. I mean, I want to come later to the impact on the players. I want to talk about some of the individual characters. But for a start, this is not a new idea, as you describe in a script you've written for a Tifo video, which I believe has already gone out at this point. So people listening may have seen that. This is not a new idea, and also clubs have already been covered in seasons past. We have Leeds, of course, who are about to release their second series, and Manchester City were covered a couple of years ago too. But it's a pretty compelling idea, isn't it?
It is. I feel as if football got its fingers burnt. So in the script we talk about Hunter Davis's wonderful book, The Glory Game, which he follows Bill Nicholson on Spurs in the early 70s. He was granted this full access, which meant that it produced a very compelling story. It's a wonderful book if anybody hasn't read it. But it also exposed some of the things that really the game and the players and some of the staff would rather have kept private. The consequence of which seemed to be that for a long time, you'd get this sort of faux access. You'd get interviews with players who were only really there to sell anything, and the idea of actually being able to peer beyond the curtain was a bit alien to football. There have been some exceptions. So there have been some excellent documentaries in the past. One of the underrated ones is probably Sunderland Till I Die's predecessor, Premier Passions, which was I forget which channel it was on, but it filmed in the 90s, and it was a little rough around the edges, and the design quality wasn't, and the production quality wasn't quite what it is today for obvious reasons. but it was excellent, very compelling. And there are some notorious examples. An Impossible Job, obviously, is attached to Graham Taylor's legacy, sadly, and the kind of the sound bites from that remain in heavy rotation today. But it's something that football has always been really uneasy with, Joe. It feels as if it shouldn't have to let people in, that it's entitled to its privacy in the way that other sports aren't. I mean, if you're a rugby fan, for instance, then you're probably aware of the great British Lions documentaries from the 90s, the Living with Lions from their South Africa tour, and the sort of, if you compare the level of access there with what you typically find in the football equivalent, or even just how scarce the football equivalents have actually been, then it's quite interesting to kind of note the cultural differences and also to appreciate what an uncomfortable marriage this is between access and football. It's a very interesting concept, and it's far broader actually than the All or Nothing series.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what's interesting to me about it is the reasons behind why a club would choose to go ahead and do this. I mean, and I note that you wrote that Daniel Levy and Tottenham were paid quite a lot of money for a start, which is genuinely something I had not even considered. Right, I thought this would just be a good branding exercise, or the club had been approached, or for whatever reason they said yes. But no, of course that makes sense. They were paid, right, which is a good thing. I guess Tottenham just built their stadium, and also retrospectively because of the coronavirus, I imagine that additional few million, however much it was, has not gone unwanted. Let's put it that way. I'm thinking quite cynically about it. This is an opportunity to bring your players, or certainly in the modern age, 21st century, a big part of the reason why teams have fans from overseas, of people following particular players like Son Heung-min, to bring them closer to your audience and to make them more appropriately brandable, and I can't think, with the exception of maybe Danny Rose, although there's a bit of different opinion on that, none of the players came across particularly badly. I can't imagine that anyone has damaged their reputation.
No, well, let me ask you a question. Have you watched any of the other All or Nothing series?
I watched the first series of Sunderland Till I Die, or maybe part of the second series, and I watched a bit of the first of the Leeds one. I haven't seen the City one though, because I heard it was just a big advert. That
I agree with. But what I'd say about the All or Nothing series generally is that it's a little bit like watching an Aaron Sorkin produced, written television series, in the sense that you get a cast of heroes. You don't get black and white characters, heroes and villains. You get this sort of light focus on the best qualities of the people involved. So I think the first one I saw was the Arizona Cardinals series, which is really excellent, by the way, if anyone wants to dig that out. It's quite a few years old now, but it's it stands up. And there are all these little focuses on the way players prepare, but also there was a I forget the name of the owner, but there's a lovely series of features with him, about the way he is in his private life, and he looks after sick dogs and stuff, and he's just he seems like a pretty decent human being. I think all of the series are designed to give you that same kind of warm in the stomach feeling, in that no one signs up to be portrayed as a villain. And the Tottenham series, as a rule, the more enjoyable the series is, your enjoyment of the series depends on how much you know about the side, how much you know about the season they're embarking on. Because if you're a Tottenham fan, then you're aware of a couple of things. So obviously the season-long Tanguy Ndombele saga, which is kind of condensed into a very short period in a very late episode. I don't think Ndombele is mentioned for six episodes, which is slightly bizarre. Also, the furloughing scandal that gripped Tottenham before the restart. Well, that was one of the biggest stories in British football for a couple of days, and it's not mentioned. So, and whilst you can rationally understand why, if you're entering it expecting a full picture and anything other than not an advert, but a very favourable version of the truth, then you're being a little bit naive. And that's why I think traditionally I've always enjoyed the NFL ones more, because, and actually there's a very good one on the Michigan Wolverines, which is a lot of fun. And I think I enjoy them because I don't know very much about American football or college football. I like it, but I wouldn't say I'm a fan or an enthusiast of any kind. And therefore, sort of in those series, what passes for access and revelation and originality, there is a lower bar for someone like me, because I know less. You know, I don't know if there were sort of secret sagas going on in the background, or if there was a drama with one of the players, or if there was, I don't know what I'm unaware of, in other words. Whereas with Spurs, because I'm much more attentive to European football, British football especially, and of course Tottenham, because I support them, it's easier to be cynical because you know what's not there, Joe. And you know also when teams sign up to this that they are going to try and pitch it with this sort of ratio. So they're going to have they're going to include one little negative Danny Rose moment, but they're going to have, 4 visits to, charitable organisations in between that, so that everybody wins, in other words. And it's a little bit like all of those, The Only Way is Essex, that type of programme. It's got a name and it eludes me, but it's like, it's scripted reality, my wife says. Okay, so it's life and it's real life, but it's with all the boring bits cut out and all the bits that nobody wants to see and all the bits that the people on screen don't want you to see. It's that, isn't it? It's a scripted reality just applied to football.
Yeah, I often think that about the hit TV series Monkey Business as well. Don't know if you ever watched.
I have not seen that.
Watched that. With Alison and Jim Cronin. It's just it's a scripted live documentary series that follows some monkeys that live in Monkey World. I think they'll endorse it, and I think, hey, these monkey characters, they seem really friendly. They're always getting up to fun, if slightly mischievous things. But what are they doing when the cameras are off? I don't work at the zoo. I'm not familiar with the biology of monkeys. I don't know how much of this is real. Do you know what I'm saying? What if the monkeys are just doing fun monkey stuff when I'm watching them on UK TV Gold? But I don't know. Also, there was a sly dig at Aaron Sorkin at the beginning of your comment there, Seb, which I hugely reject. I don't know if you've seen The Social Network, but I think there's some complex characters in that film.
Let's talk about that. I'm actually a huge Sorkin fan.
What do you mean? You just mean you like The West Wing?
No, I like The West Wing. I like The Newsroom. I really like The Social Network. I don't know how complex some of those characters are. I think it's
they're certainly more complex than the characters in All or Nothing Tottenham Hotspur. I wouldn't call it the cast of heroes in the same way.
I think you're doing Harry Kane a huge disservice, I have to say. But
actually, let's not talk about that. Let me talk about Harry Kane, who I don't know. I don't know if this is just me, or if you felt the same way, if people listening felt the same way. But for a start, every single team talk that was given by a player, blech. I mean, like, if they demotivated me, I wouldn't want to go out and play after listening to basically just a lot of swearing. And also, I'm not blaming Lloris for being French, but the natural intonation of his accent when speaking in English, going up instead of going down, at the time, which makes it feel less dramatic. Oh, God. Harry Kane pushing people around. Harry Kane, I mean, I cannot imagine a bland protagonist here. I mean, he's not the protagonist, but they obviously wanted to make him that. A more bland hero for your TV series. Like, I like him much less now. He's the only one, in my opinion, that's actually come out kind of badly, just for being, displayed as such a kind of boring one-note person.
Let me predictably jump in and defend Kane here. The people that have spent time around him, players, generally people, describe an aura. And I wonder if a player in your situation who is very much the figurehead of a club, the modern icon of Tottenham, the Isle of fans up and down the country, I wonder whether there's a little bit of pressure on someone like that. So when you know that there's an Amazon series going on, and he's not Tottenham captain, but he has that kind of de facto captaincy because of his standing in the dressing room. I wonder if there's a sort of an implied pressure to conform to certain cliches, to be a bit of a Roy Keane in the dressing room. I mean, what people say is that kind of stuff, the dressing room, Churchillian speeches, it's all bollocks. It lasts for 10 minutes and then it wears off, and then you're dependent on tactical and technical instruction, and that defines the game. All that kind of shouting rhetoric, and it's just for show. It's just to make kind of fans feel a little bit better about whether people care or not, in inverted commas. And so I wonder. I mean, I don't know if this is true. I've obviously never. I haven't seen Harry Kane, or heard Harry Kane talk in a dressing room when the Amazon cameras aren't there. But I wonder if you there's this expectation where, like, you go in and be like, shit, I'm supposed to be saying something, especially in a situation like that where Pochettino's gone. I mean, he's his departure is condensed into about 20 minutes. And the club is in a little bit of mild chaos. It's searching for leadership. Kane is the natural figure. I wonder if, had the Amazon documentary shown him sitting quietly in the corner, just, preparing for, his own performance, I wonder if that would have led to a different kind of tranche of criticism.
Well, this is a really good point to start the conversation about the players watching it, because this is how we got to this point. On last week's podcast, we talked about the idea of Spurs being impacted by having just watched all of these documentaries episodes be released and then going back to playing football again. I feel personally, whether the club would admit it or not, whether the players even know it consciously or not, there is absolutely no way in hell, if they've watched those episodes, that they are not at the very least subconsciously impacted by that. Because whether or not we think that most of the players have come across well and the perception is generally speaking very positive, there are a couple of things that come to mind for me. The first is that nobody likes watching themselves, really. And nobody is used to watching themselves. So when you do, it's a bit like when you took a photo of me when I didn't realise the other day from an angle that I haven't seen for, since the last time someone did. You look at yourself and you go, oh, is that what I look like from there, 15 feet away? And it throws you for a moment because you're used to looking at your face in the mirror. And, my face, very attractive. My bum, less attractive, right?
Well,
but
let's
secondly,
let people through the curtain a little bit, because we've been doing some filming the last few days, and this is a really interesting point because you're right. You had a weird reaction to that. We were editing a little bit of footage in which you and I both appear, and we were having a conversation about it last week where I was kind of adamant that I didn't want to be on camera unnecessarily. I don't want to see my face. I don't want to hear my voice, really anymore than I need
people react weirdly to themselves.
I think it's a really good point, absolutely.
And I think the second thing is that one of the reasons that no player particularly comes across badly, again, maybe with the exception of Danny Rose, depending on what you think about that particular scenario, and we can talk about that later. Jose Mourinho is clearly the star of the show. And for obvious reasons, right? I mean, let's not forget the speed with which this documentary team had to turn this series around is just exceptional. Like it's unbelievable that they've made what they've made on the basis of how much footage they have. Exactly, the challenges to having to miss a whole part of the season, having to try and decide what the narrative is going to be for each show, having to decide when Tanguy and Ndombele enters, for example. Like what's too much information, what's not enough. But the main task here being, you film every day, or certainly a number of days a month with these players, with these people. You film all of those days, and then you go home and you cut those things down into 2 shots. Like in the first 2 episodes, there were some heavily covered games to kind of neutralise the audience and welcome them into the idea of this being a football documentary and football being the important thing about it. But very quickly you get to the point where the games are kind of a footnote in the episodes, right? There's 2 or 3 shots that are used from the stadium. They fly to Germany with them, and that's maybe 2 minutes worth of footage, and I guarantee you there will have been hours and hours of that with multiple camera people. The editing job is astonishing, and the amount of footage that they will have had to watch through is disgusting, and it makes me feel ill. So I can understand why very easily Jose Mourinho is an obvious protagonist, and if you need to build your series around one person as a narrative, it's clearly not going to be Harry Kane, partly for personality reasons and partly for injury reasons. He just doesn't feature, right? It has to be Jose Mourinho. They also had to make the decision at the beginning about how much of the Pochettino side of the season to carry on. And I know they got criticism for that, and I know that seemed a little difficult, but they definitely, from a narrative perspective, they definitely made the right decision. You don't have your big twist like that halfway through the series when you finally just, engaged and bought into certain characters. They just disappear and some new guy comes in. That's not how telly works, right? So they definitely made the right decision there. But my perspective is that players watching this series, they will know Mourinho, of course. They will have their own impressions of him. They will have seen him making all of these comments. It's not like this is the first time they're going to see, or some of that stuff, some of the private interviews, but the first time they're going to see all of the team talks and all of the little incidental comments and what have you. It's the first time they're going to see them in the context of through somebody else's eyes, through the eyes of a production company, people who are trained in media, people who know what's interesting to other people. It inserts a natural social hierarchy into the club, into the conversations, into what's funnier, what's more interesting, what's more winnable, what's going to get more fans. It's Mourinho. And even if that's true, How does that make you feel as a football player, supposed to be, one of the stars of your team? And not only in the press are you sort of outshone by your manager, who incidentally might not be doing such a good job. Not only at every press conference are you outshone by him because it's his diversionary tactic to talk about himself or whatever to distract from the news, but also this season long, this whole year basically of being filmed by a production team who undoubtedly you will have become friends with. Turns out they really like this other guy loads, and you realise that he's the feature and you're just not that interesting. Like, that would have an enormous effect. If someone filmed you for a year, Seb, even if you were in a group, if someone came and filmed Tifo for a year and then the whole documentary was about producer AD and you barely featured in it, you would have questions about how interesting you were as a person, wouldn't you? Even if you just had a kind of, a good year where there wasn't any twists and turns, even if the reality effect, a TV thing didn't apply to you because you weren't being crazy, you would still think, am I boring?
I think there's another angle here, Joe. Like, I think if I'm not on screen for enough time, so if in that Tifo example, if my screen time is not commensurate with what I believe my role and importance to be at Tifo, I think that creates a resentment, very obviously.
Yeah.
I also think there's another problem in that Mourinho is, when you make Mourinho the star of something like that, you're given a choice. You're making a choice between, are you going to depict him as the character we suspect him to be, which is complex, antagonistic, potentially sometimes cruel, potentially brilliant too. Now, if the Tottenham series very obviously goes with a sort of a softer focus on him and showing him, motivating people and putting his arm around players and worrying about how to pronounce Japhet Tanganga's name. So that's the Mourinho they go with. Now, if you're a player in that dressing room and you see the other sides of his personality being edited out when you watch it, and then at the same time, if you see yourself being portrayed in a potentially negative way, so I would say, for instance, Dele Alli gets subtly done over by the documentary. He appears in camera when he's being accused of being a lazy trainer, or when, I forget the game, but there's a post-game session in which they're picking apart. It's the first leg of the Leipzig game where they're looking at the penalty conceded by Ben Davies, and Mourinho points out and analyses Dele Alli's movement and his responsibility and his failure to make Ben Davies aware of what's happening around him, and the
also his argument with Eric Dyer after the loss, when he seems like he's moaning, and then Eric Dyer has a go at him, even though it's pitched as a, these guys love each other and it's good that they're angry.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a bitter argument.
It really was. And also, so if you're Dele Alli now and you've seen your manager portrayed in kind of through a sort of a sepia tone lens, and this is idolized Jose Mourinho as he appears on MasterCard adverts and betting adverts and, brand Mourinho, and you're Dele Alli and you're coming across as a slightly petulant, ill-disciplined footballer, I don't think I'd be happy about that. Now, you can make arguments about how fair that is. You can talk about whether Ali deserves that, or whether, whenever Jose Mourinho comes up in conversation, there's this sort of standing army of people that defend him. I'm not quite sure why, but they do even. It doesn't matter whether what side of that you fall on. The reality is these are people, and these are people who have pride and ego, and it's a challenge to that, a series like All or Nothing, inevitably.
I would also say, to extend that slightly further, Danny Rose and Christian Eriksen as well, both players who featured in the series as so far as they were leaving the club, right? Danny Rose on loan to Newcastle, Christian Eriksen was a transfer to Inter Milan. Both of them, and this is what I found really interesting about it, I didn't really notice it so much with the Danny Rose bit, but with Christian Eriksen, when we featured those meetings with, I think Danny Rose was just with Mourinho, and that was the sort of more explosive one, which appeared to come out of nowhere because he basically hadn't featured in the documentary before that point, right? So obviously it didn't come out of nowhere for a start. The Christian Eriksen one was really interesting because he sits in the room with Daniel Levy, sits next to Daniel Levy, and his body language is very reserved. Like, he's pulled as far away from Daniel Levy as he can be. And Jose Mourinho is on the other side of the room in a little armchair. They're both kind of facing him. It's a job interview dynamic. It's a 2 versus 1 dynamic. Whether they're pretending that they want it to be something else or not, that's what it is, right? And Christian Eriksen has his heckles up. They're talking about the possibility of him being able to move to Milan. Daniel Levy is kind of in a very friendly sort of godfatherly uncle way explaining how the club needs to make some money because otherwise, it's not a good deal. You wouldn't want us to do it either, Christian. And Christian's kind of there. His response to everything that Daniel says is very, very defensive. The first thing is he says, well, I'm not in control of how much Inter Milan bid for me. And Daniel Levy's like, oh, I know, but I know. The reality of this situation is that Daniel Levy is telling Christian Eriksen something to go and tell his agent, who can go and tell another agent, who can go and tell Inter Milan, right? He's ferrying a message through a back corridor. And also, this is going to be one of a number of conversations. Christian Eriksen's immediate defensiveness to everything that's mentioned, which seems totally, placid in this conversation, seems totally unthreatening, that there's nothing wrong with this at all. And Christian Eriksen is painted as the one who's kind of threatened for whatever reason by this welcoming environment. It's quite clear that they don't trust the owners, right? That they don't trust the manager. I don't mean specifically at Tottenham. I mean, generally speaking, as a player, that the club will, where possible, in most cases, do everything it can to get everything that is best for the club. And if that means fucking the player completely, that's what they'll do, right? That is what Christian Eriksen, an experienced player, is reacting to. Christian Eriksen, who'd been at Spurs for 6 years, 5-6 years, I mean, a long time, right? That's what he's reacting to. He comes across as just, defensive and, jostling for a move. And I'm sure that that's the way that Tottenham would like that to be perceived, because they eventually let a player go who, is fantastic at what he does. And for a lot less money, I imagine, than they would have wanted to. A situation poorly resolved earlier on, essentially. Like, the club made a mistake. They should have sold him earlier, or they shouldn't have expected him to sign a new contract. The way that he reacted, and the way that Danny Rose reacted as well, which was with fury at the time, is really indicates to me a distrust there, and that these aren't one-off situations. It's not a surprise that there were those sorts of emotions displayed in both of those meetings. And I'd love to see Daniel Levy and Jose Mourinho in those conversations when the cameras are off and when they don't think they're there, or to hear the conversation between the two of them, to hear the conversation between the people at executive level, who I imagine would be much, much less friendly in the way that they were going about it. That struck me as not necessarily poorly pitched or displayed within the documentary, because I imagine that relates to a lot of stuff that the documentary team would not have had access to, but very well controlled by the club for the message that is sent out.
I think it's really interesting you brought up that scene specifically, because it's one of the ones that I have a problem with. And it's going to sound a little conspiratorial, but it felt when I was watching it as if it had been designed to correct a perception that I, a supporter, had about Daniel Levy. So the brief history of Christian Eriksen is that for a long time the club were able, with a lot of other players too, to fend off the advances of other clubs who are interested in Tottenham players by offering these individuals incremental increases in their basic wage. Eventually, Eriksen was one of those who became a little bit smart to that and started to wind down his contract, refused any attempt by the club to extend his deal. There's certainly a broad sense in the fan base that was a situation bungled by the club. It became clear quite a while ago that Eriksen wanted to leave the club, and that he'd got wise this idea of being tempted to stay by incremental increases in his contract,
or trapped.
Trapped. Well, a lot of people have used that word, Joe. That's very fair. Trapped and ensnared, maybe. And so a lot of fans think that the club missed the opportunity, missed their ideal selling point for Eriksen, were too optimistic in their valuation, were too stubborn when nobody wanted to meet it. And as a result,
United would have paid for him a couple of years before. Like they would have paid big for him.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with a journalist at Old Trafford once, who, I won't mention his name, but was adamant that United had bid a huge amount of money for Eriksen and that they'd been turned down. And a lot of people know these things, or suspect them. And so as a result, when Eriksen left, I think a lot of people were upset with Eriksen, because a lot of the irritation and frustration always lands on the player. That's just natural in football, I'm afraid. But Levy was damaged by that. He has this reputation as the kind of the apex predator of negotiators within the football world. And he'd been done over. He'd been outsmarted, really, because Inter Milan, I know it hasn't really worked out for Eriksen in Italy, but Inter Milan got a player of that calibre, theoretically in his prime, for €20 million. It's a great deal.
Yeah.
So I feel like that scene, as with a few others that we'll probably mention, was designed to kind of attack my perception.
Yeah.
It was about Eriksen. It was designed to show him in a certain way. It was also intended to show a benevolent Daniel Levy, a kind of, hey man, I'm just a reasonable guy. If someone meets my asking price, you're free to go. You've been great. We love you. Best of luck. Whereas in reality, this harks back to what we said earlier about how it benefited very much about the sport or the team. I know better than that. It's slightly insulting to my intelligence as a supporter because I know a more detailed history than that, and I also, like anybody else, just by being around the club and the news reports and spending time reporting on the club, it's a huge simplification of what was ultimately a fairly complex situation.
Well, it's not for you, is it? I guess that's kind of half the point. Maybe those ones are directed a little bit, but I will say on the Daniel Levy case, I mean, two things. Firstly, I think it is very interesting timing to have this series. I know that perhaps, obviously Pochettino takes Spurs to a Champions League final the season before, so it's not like he would have foreseen having to make that difficult decision with Mauricio Pochettino. But it's pretty amazing that those kind of difficult decisions, letting Christian Eriksen go in the January, for example, which is something he knew he'd be criticised of, and actually repeatedly throughout the docuseries references criticism. This is the one thing I associate with Daniel Levy, with the exception of insanely cringeworthy lunchtime conversations with Jose Mourinho, who seems totally uninterested. I cannot watch those. They trigger me for some reason.
My favourite one of those is when he it's after one of Mourinho's first training sessions. And Levy's just sort of cruising the corridors into the office. How you doing, Jose? How's training?
Yeah. Oh, goodness me. But not every scene, of course, but many scenes that Levy is in, and certainly what I associate with him throughout the documentary is that he repeatedly talks about a criticism of the club, criticism of him. Yeah. And maybe that's his job. Maybe his job is to try and guide Tottenham through, a complex kind of modern system of fan criticism over nebulous things. He wants to use this as an opportunity, understandably, to explain that transfers are difficult. I think he probably went a little over the top doing that, but I can understand or imagine, certainly, if you were in that position and you received the kind of, mundane, idiotic, just really fucking stupid Twitter stuff about sign this player now. It's really not that hard. It would probably piss you off, But he is in the documentary. He is nothing like the perception I had of him beforehand, and I cannot imagine that hasn't been staged in some way, or that a man of that intelligence and of that means wouldn't have, at least had, series of conversations with media professionals about his image, about what he was trying to get across. It's just interesting that this season was the season, the one where he would have been criticised if those decisions were made in the dark. It's interesting that this season is the one that was documented.
It is. I think it's also interesting because it actually it highlights the power of these series, and the kind of the usefulness and utility of them. So, Joe, you mentioned the idea that he can come onto camera and sort of subtly defend his record in the transfer market and correct a perception that he's more than aware of, which is that Tottenham are not good at bringing in players at the right time. He also sort of felt like he attempted to diffuse the criticism aimed at him for the collapse under Mauricio Pochettino, which is that funds were not made available for a build. Pochettino was kind of hung out to dry. I'm not sure. I think that's a simplification, but there are a lot of Tottenham fans who think that way. But I think having a series like this, it's a very powerful thing if you have someone like Levy, who is not a media-facing personality. His interviews in the past have been very, very few and far between. I mean, he's really not far off an Abramovich figure. Before this series, there would probably have been a few Tottenham fans who didn't even know what Daniel Levy's voice sounded like, which is very telling. Now, if you have this...
I thought it'd be much more sinister. Just because of how hard-nosed he is in the deals. I always, that's all I knew about him, was that he always struck a good deal, and I thought he'd talk something like this. You're not going to fuck around with me, mate. A bit
more bloodless and passionate, and there wouldn't be any feeling in his eyes. And I
think that's a Ray Winston light,
Yeah, but that's how he's portrayed. But then I think that actually, okay, so it's one thing you and I having this conversation. Like, I've worked in football for quite a long time. We work covering football. That is Tifo's function. So we are immersed in the game in a way that is unusual. For people who aren't, I think if you watch Daniel Levy's quote unquote performance in the series, I think that's the version of him that you go with. I think it's very seductive if you have people talking to camera. And again, this is what I was talking about with the kind of the Sorkin element earlier. You want to like these characters. And I can certainly say in the past that, when I've watched the Arizona Cardinals series, for instance, you end up really liking Patrick Peterson. He seems like a really, really nice guy. So is Carson Palmer. And you develop an attachment, which is based on a level of access that you don't usually have, that doesn't exist in the media, that doesn't, if you're not putting someone through the filter of a journalist keyboard, if you're not, if you're actually
human face,
you're giving them this human face, which is very compelling. And it surprises me a little bit. I mean, it would certainly, let's rephrase. It would surprise me if within 10 years, every club doesn't have this. Every club within reason who can afford to produce something, not probably Amazon's level, because as you said before, they do a wonderful job. It's it's an amazing piece of work. It would surprise me if clubs weren't trying to reproduce their own version of this as their own kind of in-house documentary that gives their version of a season's truth. I think we make this point in the video that I think that's where we're going, because for someone like Levy, for someone like Mourinho, you get a chance, an unopposed opportunity to tell your side of a story. And in football, goodness, given how many opinions there are and how many agendas there are, what an opportunity that is.
No, totally. I completely agree. I think that's where it's going. I'd be surprised if in 20 years, like lots of big Premier League clubs don't have these themselves, or let's say the Premier League, gets its act together and sets up a streaming service or global streaming service and ditches the broadcasters. Then imagine this, imagine having this level of access, using all that extra money that they could make doing that to film all of their teams and to create one series which followed through, behind the scenes every weekend, whatever, and then all of these separate series for all your own football, for everyone's club. I mean, I can't see why that wouldn't happen.
What you've just described there is basically NFL Films, which for people who haven't watched their work, NFL Films is magical. Even if you don't really like the NFL or American football in general, their work documenting the league, their role is to be the, I guess you describe them as the NFL's official film partner, and their chronology of decades and decades and decades worth of footage on the field and off it is just amazing. And I actually think that one of the ways in which this Tottenham series falls down is the lack of match action. I think if you look, you can find this on YouTube actually. If you find footage of Larry Fitzgerald's touchdown against Green Bay Packers and the kind of the sequence that Amazon shows within the show, within their documentary, it's magical. Like the music, the footage, the way it's shot, the angles on the people involved. So you're watching a game-winning moment first through the eyes of the fan, because you're seeing what's happening on the pitch. Then you're seeing the coach's wife in her hospitality box. He's kind of living and dying with his coaching performance. It's their life. And then you're seeing the owner who is desperately wants success. Then you're seeing the other players on the sideline, sort of the defensive players who aren't on the field at that time, and they're reacting. You see Patrick Peterson run down the side of the field. I'm not an American football fan, and I don't really much care for the Arizona Cardinals, but it gives me chills watching that. It's so well done. Yeah. It's so well done that I cannot believe the Premier League hasn't, with all its resources, hasn't tried. I accept that football is mechanically a little bit different, European football, but it's such a failing. It's a failing.
It's going to happen.
It should have happened a long time ago, because NFL Films has been doing this since the 1960s.
Yeah, but NFL is the TV sport, isn't it? That's the thing. The TV is the reason it's successful.
It is, but then you could turn that around and say that film chronology is a way of embellishing what has become an entertainment product. And hey, 1992 is now a really long time ago. We're nearly 30 years on, Joe. It is an entertainment product.
Hey, I'm going to stop you now, because I want to say one more thing before we wrap this up. Two more things, but very short things. You ready? The first is, this is a really good series. I like it. If you watch it knowing all of the things that I feel like I know about what it's supposed to do to you, and not allow yourself to be kind of sucked in by the advert side of it, which I'm sure I have, unbeknownst to me. It's impossible to do it without doing that in some aspects. But just, if you are an educated viewer, then this is very, very compelling television. I like it a lot. Good job, excellent job, all the people who made it. Well done. And, it can't have been easy to be followed around by cameras for a whole year as well. So well done to everybody at Tottenham Hotspur. But the other thing, I just want to talk about Danny Rose before we go, because I left that hanging before.
Yeah.
Because it was very interesting to me, Seb. That was pretty much the only scene in which he featured. There was a split among people watching. Some people thought, go on Danny Rose, you tell him. Other people thought, you're a spoilt player, whatever. What struck me was the line about him wanting to go to a bigger club and not wanting to go to Bournemouth for that reason. And so, whether or not the bigger club, air quotes thing, means top four or means a club that is, above Danny Rose's current standing or at the time is in doubt to me. Maybe that certainly made it sound very clear cut in a way that I don't know whether it would be. Things tend to be a little more complicated than that. But also, I found very interesting the idea that a player who exists in an environment, like a football club, or certainly a Premier League football club, might not have the same objective ability about their own talent and their own current level as it relates to other players. Because if Danny Rose really wanted to go to one of the big four teams, I think that was something that was possible 3 years before.
I agree.
Not the season that we just watched. It certainly wasn't. And I think Newcastle was probably a good fit for him. And I don't mean that in a critical way. Like I wouldn't go up to Danny Rose and shout in his face that he's shit, because he's certainly not. He's obviously a phenomenally talented player, as every player in the Premier League is. You have to be at that level. So it's not a criticism in that sense. It's just I'm just curious about a player's ability to be incapable of objectivity in that sense. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
But it's the environment, right? I mean, presumably it doesn't allow them to be, or they're not surrounded by people who are going to be honest with them.
I think that's probably fair. I think one of the difficulties for Danny Rose was that was probably watching Kyle Walker get his move to Manchester City, because Walker and Rose as a fullback tandem were incredibly dynamic. They were a source of great energy for Pochettino's team. The objectivity point is interesting because it's really hard to get a sense of how a player feels. It's also, it must be a very isolating world, because you cannot speak out. You cannot just habitually, you mustn't listen to too much of the noise that surrounds you, because so much of it is negative, so much of it is hyperbole. So it must be very, very easy to get lost in that environment. What I'll say is that there are two things about Danny Rose. One, I think there's a lot of him that I really admire. I think he's a voice for tremendous good. He has an emotional intelligence which is rare in footballers, I think. At the same time, I think he's made some quite poor decisions. I think if you're a lot of Tottenham fans are supportive of his sort of his public criticism of the club, because it echoed with a lot of their frustrations. However, I think someone of his intelligence knew full well that if you give interviews to The Sun in which you say the kind of things that he did, in which you're very, very critical, you know full well how antagonistic you're being, and you know exactly how people are going to respond to it, because there are some players that you think you're just naive, you don't know what you're doing. Danny Rose isn't one of those people, I don't think. It's a very difficult topic. It's a real shame that he didn't win something, because you're quite right. He was a superb player for a couple of years. I don't think his career is a superb career. I think he had 2 or 3 really, really good seasons. And it's a shame to hear that he hasn't enjoyed his football as much as he could have done. I think the way he ended his Tottenham career reflects very poorly on the club. He found out that he wasn't being given a squad number through television, which, if that's true, I think that's really poor form for a player that's been there for such a long time. I think that's not really on. I don't like that. But there are very, very much two sides to that argument, I think, without sort of going to the detail that we can't discuss. But it's very difficult, and I think you see some of that in the documentary. I think you see the conflict, and I mean, we've been quite critical. I think the product is great. I think the nature of the show is it's not really for me. I think the scene between him and Mourinho is great. I think it's I think it's been stage managed to an extent. I think Mourinho is very, very aware that there are cameras in that room. I think his response probably a little tempered by that. But I think you see that a little, yeah.
He plays like the kind of abused member of the party, doesn't he? I mean, he plays the one who's kind of like under the fierce grapple of Danny Rose. I mean, fucking come on, man. Not you, Mourinho.
No. I mean, I agree to an extent, but then that was a situation that Mourinho inherited, so I've got a little bit of sympathy for him. Because Danny Rose was discontent for a long time before Mourinho got to the club. But Mourinho is part of the performance, isn't it? But Rose is the one that you watch, and I think you see someone that is fighting some things and is very conflicted about where his career is, and he wants to play football, but he kind of doesn't. But he's an interesting guy.
I admire it, man. Like, I think, he goes into the room the room of a man with a huge global reputation for being
and goes after him.
A genius manager, for being whatever, for being kind of tough on players and that sort of thing, and he just says no, like straight away.
Yeah.
I think, I know maybe it's not handled in the right way, and as you say, maybe there's poor decision making and whatever. But I for one, I feel very comfortable in saying that documentary does not give the context to that situation. This is the first scene that Danny Rose really appears in. That's it, and then he's gone. That's all we see. All we know of the narrative. What I see is an employee going into a workplace where he feels he's being mistreated and telling his boss to fuck off, and that always gets me excited. I hope none of my employers are listening.
This is my next question.
I'm coming for you. I'm coming.
I just think that sort of with the context, you're quite right. That situation is badly lacking in it. But then I suppose you could probably make another documentary series out of Danny Rose versus Tottenham. And it would be very, very interesting, arguably even more so. Yeah. So it's a difficult situation, but it's compelling. Can we have one little mention of the Tanguy and Ndombele scene where Moussa Sissoko and Serge Aurier just gather around the table and talk about how hasn't really gone as it might have done.
I think is this the last episode? Because this is the one I haven't seen. It's
the penultimate one. I think it's the penultimate one where the three of them, because they will obviously speak French, and Tanguy and Ndombele's English is a bit limited at the moment. He's only been here for a few months, so fair enough. But they're discussing his difficult first season, and it's kind of, hey man, if you just try hard and you work and everything will be fine, and then at one point Tanguy's asked, why did you become a footballer? He's like, I just love football. And it's kind of one of those things where you're meant to be you're meant to leave that scene thinking, you know what? I'm going straight out and I'm getting Tanguy and Ndombele's name on the back of my Tottenham shirt. He's just a good guy. He just loves the game, man. And I'm sure he does. It's not a reflection on him at all. It's the low point for me of the series, just because I think I watched him play, man. And to his credit, he started to revive his career, and good luck to him. But it was a funny moment. It did make me laugh.
Okay. Well, that's the end of our podcast. We'll be back later in the week with another thing. Don't know what that'll be. But have a lovely day, I suppose. Thanks to you, Seb.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Also to producer AD, who's here as a standard today instead of producer Adonis. Thank you, producer AD. He's doing all the hard work behind the scenes. We're just showing up to chat, and now we're leaving again. So yeah, cheers. See you later. Goodbye.